Welcome to the Lighthouse sessions. I'm really excited. I have Jeannie Dougherty with me today. Jeannie, why don't you just tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do, please?
Sure. My clients call me a money whisperer because I can actually tell by listening about the way you talk about your money or your business, where your money is blocked and how to fix it. So I have a rare gift in that sense.
I love it. And I love anybody. I've claimed the title AI whisperer. So anybody else who's a whisperer, we get along great. So let's dive in. How did you become a money whisperer? And then we'll get into how you serve people, because I think money blockage is probably the number one cause of business failure, in my opinion.
You're not wrong. Yeah, I think what the average is about like 50% of all businesses fail within the first 5 years. And it's usually because people don't really know what else to do. And it's like a sales, marketing, and resource stuff. But anyway, how did I get into becoming a money whisperer? It certainly wasn't a class or a program or a certification that I took. It's really based on life experience, and just also I'm a naturally observant person. I'm not always perfect at that, but I'm observant. So how it got started is I'm actually trained as a mental health and substance abuse counselor, but counseling is different than whispering. You can try to guide people towards like, hey, this is the safe road, or this will save you a lot of pain. Okay, we're going down the pain road. Let's do this, and you can try to help people in that way, but that's not really how I got started. So I'm a bit of a statistical outlier in my family because both of my parents passed away from Alzheimer's. My father died when I was in my 20s. My mother died when I was in my 30s. And what happened after when my mother finally passed away, the person who was responsible for her caregiving, the medical and financial power of attorney, financially exploited her estate, and she didn't know. And we had a lot of mixed feelings, but there was literally layers of lies and, just BS, for lack of a better term. And each family member was told something different. So I wasn't in control, but I was supposed to be, somebody who is a beneficiary. And so the great benefit I learned was a very important life lesson, which is that financial exploitation can happen in about at least 30% of all families, if not more, that somebody's literally stealing from another family member. Or it's something else. It's some other situation that it's just constant mismanagement, or you're handing money away to people that normally you wouldn't do that, but since your faculties are not so good, that's bad. So I got to tell you, it is never an easy experience to have a family member take the money and run and then cause harm to your actual parent. So my mother's care was not provided for, and we went to court and we lost. There wasn't anything we could do. So I was left with a lawyer bill and finding out all of the god-awful things that had been done in the name of my mother's care. And what was sad to me is that my mother really cared and loved this person, but they did not return that in favor. So my biggest question I had at that time was, it's not that, do you know if somebody's lying? Because what we learned in court was, can you prove it? And that takes time and money, and we didn't have access to everything. So, but most importantly, what I learned was what is the point of life if people work really hard or marry well, and then they get sick, and then it becomes a situation of ugliness that I've never seen in my life, or I've never experienced. And it wasn't a nice, Law and Order episode,
Nice, neat conclusion at the end.
Yes, everyone was shot dead, and it was terrible. But the bad people are dead. It wasn't like that at all. Yeah. So I just kind of decided in my own grief, I would pay attention to how I was feeling, but also pay attention to why is it that everyone kind of went along with this one answer? Why did everyone do this? Why did everyone do that? Why did I not push harder at certain points? Why did I do that? And I was in dance classes for about 2 years. And I walked in one day to my dance class, and there was this flyer on the wall for Dance and Money. And nobody I know, see, I got you. Nobody I know has heard of that.
That's an
Like,
combination.
why? Why would you, dance around money? And it's like, do you get that phrase? A lot of people
Yeah.
dance around money. But why would you dance to maybe understand your money psychology? Or why would you dance to learn to get better about money? Why would you face things that are challenging or difficult? So what I decided to do was I just said, I think I should go. It was pre-pandemic. So it was like 4 days. Like, so we actually, got in the car, went to a dance workshop, like people were breathing on each other. There was no worries or concerns about, nobody was checking vaccine rates, none of that stuff. And it was quite an experience. And so I decided to sign up for about a year with this money coach, because that's when I met my very first emotional behavioral money coach. And this guy, he's Canadian, and he went around the world teaching like dance and money workshops. And he would talk about how people would be so angry at him because dance is spiritual, or dance is whatever, calisthenics, or, whatever you want to call it, but you can't talk about money. And I was like, wait a second. Like, talk about the ultimate lie that we sometimes tell ourselves. I thought, this is really fascinating. So at the end of it, after my year, I thought, I think I'd be good at this. I think I would really enjoy this process, helping people come to terms with their own financial psyche and healing it in a way that makes sense. And so, of course, they make more money.
Yeah.
One of my biggest gripes about budget coaches, nothing against them, I do love them, but they serve a different purpose. They're going to be like, Jeff, let's look at your numbers. Here's what your expenses. Here's what you do. This is where you put your savings. And this is how you kind of stay on top of it. Not everyone can follow a spending plan. As a matter of fact, most people fail at it. And it's because of their emotions and what's in front of them. They don't know any other way because they weren't taught by their family or their life experiences. Like, no, spend the money now. It won't work later, that kind of thing. So I just was like, yeah, this is a very different realm, understanding people's emotional money psychology. I will say, somebody who went through this process of, dealing with what we often refer to as a money tyrant or financial, parasite. I sometimes refer to it as, you want to get out of those relationships quickly or lawyer up even faster if it's a really disastrous situation. And I am always amazed how people spend a lot of time trying to think, do they not understand me? Do they don't care? And they spend all this psychic energy trying to, come up with an answer of what is going on with this other person. And all that energy needs to come back to you. And you need to understand, what is it that you want? Meaning, what is your goal? What is clear for you? What is opaque? And really, where are your values? So if you don't like this conversation or you don't like this person, you have the right to get out. You have the right to end it as soon as possible, because that's how you save yourself and your money and your sanity. Because, when I was grieving, going to court in litigation, I didn't feel very sane. I mean, I wasn't like totally insane, but I didn't feel like I was safe. I didn't really, couldn't believe, lie after lie after lie was being told. And, then all of the family members were like, wait a minute, he lied to me and he lied to her and he lied to her. And we're like, mm-hmm. And so then it was suddenly revealed that we were dealing with somebody who was never going to be honest, ever. And that is a sobering thing that happens with money every day. And it's not just in families, it happens in business too.
Yeah.
So I ended up honing my money whispering skills, because you can never go this deep into grief without coming out and experiencing some level of joy, but also, just what I call that neutral and healthy, perception of like, you say you want to do this, but I'm not seeing that. So for instance, like if you own a business, Jeff and I were just chatting about this earlier, and you want to have a virtual call, if you can never get on the actual video to build trust. I'm not saying, like, sometimes people are like, I'm in a bad neighborhood, or, the connection's rough, or, like that's normal. But I'm saying, if you can never be like, hey, this is me, makeup, no makeup, whatever, and say like, this is what I'm doing, then it's really hard to know who you are as a person. But it's easy to lie when you're withholding.
I love that. And I think this is truly the whole point of the visionary entrepreneur angle to the show is I've yet to meet a visionary entrepreneur who didn't come from some sort of struggle, and once they found their way through it, they look at it and go, oh wait, that can be a business. And I like the phrase turn your mess into your message. What I think a lot of people miss is that you have to process your mess before it can be a message. If
Exactly.
you're, woe is me, everything sucks, that's not a message anybody cares about. But if you say, wow, I went through some stuff and here's what it looks like and here's how I got through it. One of my other favorite quotes is from British Prime Minister Winston Churchill.
Yeah.
When you're going through hell, keep going. And once you make it through, help others. Turn your mess into your message is so much shorter, but
Yes. Well, and many times I thought of that quote, from Winston Churchill, if you're in hell, you have to keep going. Meaning you don't stay here.
Yeah. It's not a destination. Yeah. And I think that's something, and for what it's worth, Jeannie, I spent many, many years as an accountant, and I thought people just needed to know what to do. Now, and this is why you're on the show, I realize that mindset and the beliefs, I mean, again, I'm just one of those weirdos. I need to do something, I do it. But when I looked at people and I'd say, well, here's all you need to do. You need to set aside, our mutual friend Jeannie, she uses 60-40 rule. You set aside 60% to live on, 40% goes to other things. Most people start with enthusiasm and then fall off the wagon because, saving is hard. And, today me wants something and tomorrow me doesn't get what they want because I had to spend it today. And, I really needed that $10 coffee or whatever it is.
Right. I think you're right. People fall off the wagon, and it's because I always say it's because you have an untrained money brain. It's easy to knuckle down for 3 to 6 months because you need to get a car, or you need to look good financially in order to buy a home. But what isn't talked enough about in the US is that people can have tens of thousands of credit card debt, pay it off roughly in a year, meaning year to year and a half, maybe 2, and then they'll go right back to it. And it's like, what was the lesson here? And I would say that people do what I call that sort of roller coaster ride with their money and their finances and their spending, sometimes for good reasons. Sometimes there's like medical issues or they were out of work, and sometimes this happens. But when it's just like, well, I mean, I had a job, but I didn't really like the job, so I quit, and then I just put everything on a credit card, and you're like, okay.
That's not a plan.
I mean, well, it's a plan, but it will only get you so far as your credit.
Yeah. And that's the thing. I know a lot of people, they get a big annual bonus. They know they're getting an annual bonus, so they rack up the debt, pay it off when they get their bonus. And then a friend of mine one year, they didn't get the bonus. And that was a gut check moment because the way they'd always done it didn't work anymore. So
yes. I mean, but there's all kinds of financial, experts who share, like anytime you get a bonus that should, you can spend this little portion of it and put the rest of it in savings or your 401k or put it in your kids, college fund, blah, 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 blah. Yeah. And I think people do try to do that with good intentions. But I definitely think it's shame and fearing your burn rate, which is a corporate term, actually, when it comes to money. But people do this with their own finances, which is, how long can you sustain while you drain down the cash? And the answer is not as long as you'd like. That's usually the answer, not as long as you'd like. And, you're going to end up having to pay stuff back. That's going to be harder, and you have to plan a little further out, and you may delay your retirement easily 10 to 15 years if that's the plan.
Yeah. And I think that's the thing. We do seem to have this instant gratification society but I want it now. And it's like, well, I heard something on the radio recently that made me cringe. It was actually just before Christmas. There was one of those payday loan companies.
Oh, geez.
you know, and basically there was a mom going, I don't want to disappoint the kids. You know, I don't like the gifts we got. And then some voiceover comes on and says, don't fear, we'll lend you $1,500, no questions asked, blah, blah, blah. And, oh, thank God, Christmas is saved. And it's like, but at what cost? What does New Year's look like because Christmas was saved?
Yeah. And I think this is where we get into what I call cash flow dynamics. It's not about, you know, okay, this big event, Christmas or a birthday is saved. Now you have the money, or let's put it even more in a, oh my gosh, money was, or let's say the Christmas gifts were stolen. And then you're like, oh no, you know, and so I understand a payday loan in that case, but $1,500 seems like a lot, but let's just assume that's what they needed. And they don't pay attention to, you know, if you do not make that payment the day it's due, this is where predatory loans happen. This is where people, they could spend months getting their, if not years, of their wages getting garnished. And then you are literally up the paddle, or up the creek, I should say, up the creek with no paddle. That doesn't make any sense, up the paddle. Up the creek with no paddle. And, you know, family members are going to be like, we told you not to do that. No. Why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that? You know? And so it's all driven by a sense of like, I don't want to fail, but I'm failing. And then, you know, when the payday loan doesn't work, or you're like, oh, but I had to pay for daycare. And I just, you know, I deal with this later. And it's like, ooh, you know, because then this becomes the, like, forget, you know, credit cards. This thing's got to get paid off immediately. And then you got to go tackle other debt. Yeah. And so many people do debt consolidation and they go right back to debt. I'm like, okay.
Cut up those cards.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I think that's, now, what do you see as a bigger problem today? And you know, let's talk about working with you. Are people emotionally spending to deal with something inside that's missing, or is it stress? Like, where are people going astray where they come to you and say, help me, Jeannie, I'm desperate?
Well, as I try to remind some people, is that we have the ability to buy something on this planet anywhere in the world. And Amazon has done that. But, you know, you think about Target, Walmart, even going to the grocery store. There was times that stuff was just really seasonal, so you couldn't get it anyway. So you didn't have to pay for it. Yeah. We have this ability that we can buy anything. And if you get on certain social media sites, even LinkedIn, it's all about, look what you can afford. You know, you can buy this and then you'll have this really cute little pretty cup. Even though it's $100 and it says the word Stanley on it, you can walk around with that mug and you'll be part of the Stanley crew. And I just look at that cup and I'm like, I'm good. I don't need it. I mean, I get it, but I wouldn't spend that kind of money on a Stanley cup, but I get it. People want to buy it. So I think that's part of it, is I want to own this product so I will feel included, which still goes back to high school kind of things. But more importantly, people are not aware of their cash flow. Like, if you get paid on such and such date, do you pay your bills? People will say, yeah, mostly. And then the ones that they don't, like, where do they go? Like, what did you do? Are you able to eat out? How many times a week? Or are you going to, do Uber Eats or DoorDash, or, everything's going to be Instacart, because you still have to get in the car if you're going to get it delivered, to your vehicle or whatever. So, and I think it also makes the ability to buy food and products, even less stressful, because I meet so many parents who are like, oh my God, thank God for Amazon, it'll be here the next day. And I'm like, at the price of what? At the price of labor, at the price of convenience, yes. But back in the day, people either went without or they figured out stuff. And I think the fear of I can't fail really pushes people in places that they don't recognize. They just assume this is normal. I mean, there are so many dual income families that make high six figures and even 7 and even in 8 figure, and their expenses are enormous to the point that they're like, they don't have really any cash.
Yeah. Well, and one thing that fascinates me is there's a lot of, I hear this in a lot of entrepreneurs, when I get to 7 figures, everything will be fine. Oh, yeah. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, when I get to 8 figures. And one thing that fascinates me is when people go up in income, their expenses, and let's use the term expenses loosely, the must-haves become bigger than the can-haves. And I've actually seen it a couple times. People win the lottery and they end up devastatingly deep in debt because some bank was willing to lend them money based on the fact that they won a lottery. And it's like, well, that doesn't mean they know how to keep it. They just know.
Yeah. I mean, it's so true. Like 2/3 of all lottery winners lose it, whatever the big money was. And you're right. There's, in our money brains, I want the following, product, services, experiences. I want these right now. Oh, but I don't want to do them all by myself. So I'm going to take my friends. That's like another big problem with lottery winners, is that they end up funding a lot of people who are not their friends, but they're funding them.
Yeah. I've actually worked with a couple of artists and a couple of really successful business people who their entourage benefited very well from them. But once the money was gone, so were the quote unquote friends.
Yep. I like them apples.
Yeah, I had one. She used to throw, she was a songwriter and she had this one big hit that went huge, millions in the bank. And she had so many great friends. She bought this big mansion so that she had room for, I think it was 20 people at a time. And she was having all these house parties. And
wow.
Of course, she didn't realize that a one-hit wonder, those royalties drop over time. And it was literally, she had sold the house and she was waitressing, and of course all of her friends, oh, I don't have time to see you, I'm busy. But she enjoyed the high life while it was there. But the funny thing was, she deeply resented, she referred to it as that effing song. She resented the song because it ruined her life. And it's like, well, actually you did. The song just gave you the rope to hang yourself, so to speak. So
yeah, so that's so interesting, because the reason that people don't always get out of debt is they haven't forgiven themselves or other people. Like, that's an emotional fact. And people want to strangle me every time I say that. But the way I got through my mother's experience, even though I didn't end up with any extra, I ended up losing money, but I said, you know what, like, I want to forgive because I want to be free.
Mm-hmm.
That was more important to me, and it still is more important to me, like being peaceful and calm and feeling free and not even wasting an ounce of my mental or precious psychic energy on what's going on with them, because it doesn't matter. I have forgiven them and I've chosen to move forward. That's a totally different aspect of our money brains that need to actually be adult. Like, I feel like adulting is, it's not about paying your bills on time, but it's about being able to weather a storm and being okay with, the fact that you're going to lose sometimes and you're going to win. And you got to pay attention to both, because they're both life lessons. I think really one of the final things that we learn as adults, if we make it this far, Jeff, is that an insult is as good as a compliment. Meaning, we don't have to be hung up on like, oh, I don't know if they really mean it, but you can be like, it's really nice that person said that, but I'm not gonna put my entire psychic energy and like, oh, I want them to like me even more. No.
I love it. Now let's talk about your programs and how people work with you, because I think, again, I spent a lot of my life thinking people just needed skills, and now it's like, if we don't talk about mindset first, nothing else matters, because no skill I can teach you will stick if you don't change your mindset. And I'm going to quote Einstein. I think it was Einstein. He said, you can't solve a problem at the same level of thinking that created it.
Yes.
And I think that's what I see, is people doing the same things over and over again, accepting the same beliefs over and over again, and somehow thinking this time it's different.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's classic. Einstein was so bright about that, but his personal life was kind of a hot mess. He married his first wife, and then cheated on her with his secretary. And then like the secretary was like, but he doesn't pay attention to me anymore. Why did you think? he was going to take good care of you because he, I don't know what he said, because Einstein wasn't the most emotionally vapid person out there, but somebody told themselves a story that this person really loved them and all this was okay. And then you find out, oh, this is what you get, which is crazy seconds if you're lucky. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So how people work with me, it's two ways, and I'm actually developing a third because I pay attention to like what people tell me and what they say. And I think about like, well, what does it take here? Like if you want to really rewire your money brain, that's what I call it. When people get their money brain rewired, I'll explain it from just the emotional and behavioral standpoint. If you go to a neurologist and say, can you tell me about my money brain? They're going to look at you and like you're lost your mind, because the whole brain works with money. It's not like there's only one area. There are aspects of like gambling and shopaholic that get more activated. And, if you get depressed or anxious, that can impact your money, but nobody's really doing studies on what does that look like? A millionaire's money brain? Because it probably looks very stressed out. I bet you that's what it looks like. But the way we learn about money is often what we call on the left side of the brain, which is about the numbers. It's about the logic. It's about the data. And many times it's wired through fear and survival, because that's how we've learned through our families or past experiences. And we learn what I call this money mind virus, which is there's never enough money. We'll never make enough. So we always have to push hard to make more. Even if you marry well, you're going to have to turn to your spouse and be like, listen, you are the one who's got to go make the money. So get moving. And for some people that works, but for most it does not. But it's on the right side where the real, what I call rewiring happens. It's where we're able to get into different emotional states, hello Einstein, that allow us to grow and allow us to do things differently. So number one thing is empathy. So as I said before, it's a kind of an emotional fact. Like if you've got debt, you haven't forgiven yourself or somebody else, and people just get so mad. But empathy is really the antidote. And why is it? Because if you understand that people are going to make mistakes, maybe you had no forewarning on what this person was going to do, have some empathy for yourself. How could you know? I thought it was very interesting during the pandemic how some people had no empathy for other people who were struggling, but more importantly, they had no empathy for like other countries. Well, I don't understand why they just don't get like the vaccine, or why they just don't open back up. And it's like, every country is different. They have different rules. They've got different people, different cultures. And quite frankly, we're all in the same, the same sea, but we're not all in the same boat, which is applying empathy in a situation that you don't control.
Yeah.
The next piece is about getting more curious instead of downtrodden and like, it's over, I'll never do this. Again, boo-hoo-hoo, I put my blood, sweat, and tears into this and it failed. And it's like, how many millionaires have failed at a business? Like failed.
Almost all of them, I bet.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would say like there are times that we maybe start off in our business that it doesn't go as we planned it, or you might have been great your first year, but then your second and your third and your fourth year, you're bored and it's not going as well. Right. Yeah. The other piece is about really tapping into your creativity, because it's our creativity that saves us from stress. Or it's our creativity that allows us to make new connections, find new ways to do things, be willing to take a chance. When you're in the mud, you don't have a chance to really be like, oh, I wonder how I could do this differently. Nope. You're like, I got to get out of the mud and get myself cleaned up. Not a bad place to start, but what are you going to do differently? It's kind of the same thing, of like, oh, darn it, I have all this credit card debt again. And I promised myself I wouldn't do that. How could you do that differently? Yes, you can, cut up your credit card debt and won't spend any money and everything will be fine. But I had a conversation with a business owner and I was sort of like, whoa. So they did this massive debt reconsolidation and they, cut up their credit cards. So like, I can't touch anything for 7 years. I said, okay, what are you going to do when you're literally 70 and you're retired? I'm going to move to a different country. Okay. But your spending habits haven't changed.
Yeah.
So what are you going to do in another country where stuff might be more expensive? Like, I love it when people are like, I'm going to go live on an island. Stuff is expensive on an island. Did anyone tell you this? It's expensive.
I've lived on an island and yes, you pay extra for everything.
Because it's an island. They got They don't grow it, so you got to bring it.
Yeah.
So like, you're like, I either you pass away these, before the 7 years is up and then you won't have to worry about it. Or are you willing to have somebody else take care of your money? Oh, no, I'm going to keep working. Got it. And they know they're bad with money. This is not am I good with money? It's about, I don't know any other way to live. So I would rather spend it now and be happy, even though I know the bad is coming.
Yeah. And again, that's a tomorrow me problem, not a today me, right?
Yes. So when I work with people, I do what we call the money boot camp. And the money boot camp is for people who are really serious about, like, I really need to get to figure out what's underneath all this emotional stuff with my money. And I want to see things improve. And I love it for folks who do that. We do it in less than 90 days, meet once a week. We go over this. I give you daily, mindfulness exercises, as well as looking at your numbers, showing you how to look at your numbers from a more neutral space, so that when something happens, like a choice, instead of you freaking out and going to do either like, oh no, we're doomed, or let's spend the money, Jeff. Let's go. We made the money. We're good. That you can kind of evaluate it from a different place, because that I don't think is taught. Usually what I hear is that it's like, if they have to look at their numbers, there's usually a parent screaming at them, telling them they don't have enough money and they better not screw it up. Well, who feels good about that?
Yeah. Throw the guilt and shame on top and see what happens. Right?
And you haven't even made a money decision yet. It's just like, oh God, I'm gonna totally screw this up.
And if I may, Jeannie, I'm just going to point out, you talk about having empathy, and one of the things I find fascinating, I know a lot of really empathetic people, they're incredibly forgiving and kind to other people, but they don't give themselves that same level of empathy, which I suspect is a big part of what you're dealing with as well. Is that fair?
Yes, that's very fair. And that's very observant of you to notice.
I deal with a lot of fascinating people, and I see patterns in places most don't, but it's fascinating when people haven't done the inner work. And I say this across any skill set that I've seen. If you're not willing to work on yourself, and forgiveness is a gift you give yourself, compassion, again, in COVID, a lot of people, you have to give others grace and yourself.
Right.
We tend to forget that the most important one, and one of my mentors actually said, until you realize the only enemy that can truly defeat you is the one who looks back in the mirror every morning, then you can't be free. But once you realize that you're causing your problems, then you can start to solve them.
Yes.
And I went, you're annoying, but damn, you're right.
Yes. Yeah. But here's the thing about Zoom and Google Meet and FaceTime and all this other stuff that I hadn't thought of, but I realized, I was like, oh, I can see how this happens. So remember, like in the very beginning, at least I remember this very clearly, like in 2020, like people weren't sure like where to put their camera. They didn't know they needed to get a light because they'd have all this light, and you're like, what are you doing? We can't see your face. They're like, it does not matter. And it's like, it does when you're online. Do you have like ears, or do you have, like a microphone? Oh, does that matter? It does. Like people want to have a clear conversation, like it is a coffee chat, but there's not like a ton of people yelling and screaming, so there are things like that I think people we got better at learning that. But I didn't know this, but the rates of what do you call it, plastic surgery on people's noses, their eyelids, their mouths, like their lips, and like the filler, like that's gone up dramatically, because when people look at themselves online, they do not like what they look at. And I thought, instead of like, how can I make myself look the best foot forward? Like to me, I'm like, I know what to do. I'm going to get the lighting. I've got my, my audio together. Everything's charged or is charging right now. Going to shut off all these little, so I can stay focused. And people are like, wow, I never thought of it that way. And it's like, that's a skill. But what's behind it is, I would like to have a conversation with you and have the best conversation we can.
totally random, but my friend, our mutual friend Jeannie,
Mhm.
I just assumed her headset was part of her look because I'd never seen it without. And she actually came to visit me, and I'm like, oh my God, I literally didn't recognize her without the headset.
Yeah,
She
yeah.
did this, and I went, oh yeah, that's better.
Yeah. Yeah. But that's somebody who's like, oh, this is who I am. This is what
Yeah,
I do. Like, and I do hope that people get to that point in life that they get like, this is who I am. This is what I look like.
yeah.
It's okay. But I do think that weird competition that impacts our money brain forces us sometimes to go and do that spending thing in ways that we're like, really? Oh, I hated my nose. And people are like, what's wrong with your nose? Like,
Hmm.
it's not broken.
Yep.
None of us hold that level of standard.
Well, it's fascinating because back in the day, this was a few decades ago, so don't judge them too harshly, but I had friends, twin sisters, and one had a teeny tiny nose and one had a normal nose. And the one with the quote normal nose, her life's mission was to save up and get nose surgery so that she'd look like her sister.
Oof.
And it was odd because they were almost identical except their nose. And when she got her nose done, she looked really strange because, this was in the 90s. So it was a 1990s version of a nose surgery, rhinoplasty or whatever it's called.
Yeah, yeah. Mhm.
But it was like, the interesting thing was then she was like, oh, my nose looks terrible. I wish I had my old nose back. I was like, just get used to whatever you have right now because she was actually saving up for her restoration surgery. And it was like, oh God, please just stop. So
Yeah, as I often say, self-love is free. It's so good to invest in it. Like, this is what I look like today. I'm going to be okay with it,
yeah,
because even people who are very famous, you've either had a lot of work done
yeah,
to keep them, at that level. But they talk to people just like you and I, who are probably more in the average range,
yeah,
and they're okay with it.
yeah.
Why? Because they know all the work they had to do to get there. And so they're like, yeah. And I always find that fascinating. People who are very beautiful end up marrying somebody who looks rather plain. And I'm like, oh, there's some justice in the world, right?
There's justice and hope for all, right?
That's right. Or, they finally found somebody who's a good match for them, who isn't, a competitor. You think about when there's always really good looking people, you're like, yeah, how long will this last?
Yeah. It's like, yeah, they're not gonna, because again, if somebody is extremely, as society says, extremely beautiful, they don't want somebody taking away their light. They want to shine brighter. So,
Exactly.
well, you and I could chat for hours. I think I'd better let you get back to your day. But how can people connect with you? How can they find out what it means to whisper, how the money whisperer can help them in their life? How can they find you, Jeannie?
On LinkedIn.
Excellent. And spoiler alert, yes, her name and her LinkedIn profile will be in the show notes. I make life really easy. If you're watching this and you like Jeannie, connect with her. I promise she's a good person. She likes to talk to you, and she will, if she can't help you, she'll point you somewhere that can. Is there anything I should have asked you, Jeannie, you want to share that I didn't yet?
Yes. What I like to say is that when people work with me, in about 30 days, they end up start making more money because we're able to either plug some of the leaks that they have, but also money starts to come to them, like clients that they didn't expect or just new opportunities. They sleep better. They actually like themselves. They have better financial conversations. And it's like a turning point, like they become a better person. And I think if we can always be a better version of ourselves without having to do a lot of like, oh no, we need an extreme makeover to fix me, then it feels a lot better. It feels like, oh yeah, I am this good. I am this wonderful person.
I love that. Well, Jeannie, I really want to thank you for hanging out with me and for sharing your message with my people.
Thank you, Jeff. This has been amazing. And I absolutely love what you're doing.